as Jonathan mentioned, I'm going to talk about processing data in plugins, and more specifically about something I've been working on the last little while, the Active Objects plugin. The idea is to bring active objects in a plugin for you guys to persist any sort of data. This is pretty exciting because we've seen many plugins that need to store a lot of data and more data and sophisticated domain models in some sort of persistence layer. And for now, what the plugin system was offering is not quite up to scratch with the sort of things you want to do. Example of such plugins, a good example is Greenhopper that we created quite recently. It's using a lot of data, and the system we provide is not quite adequate for it. So we'll see how we're trying to solve that problem right now. I'm going to first go quickly through sort of the existing mechanism of storing data, what you have right now in all the products and available versions for you guys to persist data. Then I'll go to the goals, what we set for ourselves and for you guys, so that you get better persistence mechanism, and how the Active Objects plugin fits the bill, or at least we think it does, and how we want feedback from you guys. And I'll show you a bit of code and how it works, in code and in the SDK. Just quickly about myself, I've been working at Atlassian for 4 years now, and I've changed and worked in many different teams. So I sort of seen different issues with the plugin system and everything like that. And I'm now part of the dev relations team. As Jonathan mentioned, I work from France. So how do you persist data in a plugin at the moment at Atlassian? If you take Jira, as a plugin developer, the one jigsaw puzzle there is a plugin, or you can imagine it is. You get property set. So basically, what property set is a key value pair store. You store a string, and it's up to you to make that string whatever you want. Which means that if you have a complex object model, basically you have to serialize that string with whatever technology suits you, and then it's stored by property set into the database. Not quite ideal when you have a lot of data. Many developers tend to use Extreme with that to serialize their data. On the other side, Jira uses OffBiz, which is an ORM layer. And I've seen many times on the forums people asking, okay, I want to store more data. I want to make it easier for me because property set is not good. Well, it's not good enough. It's nice for simple plugin properties, etc. But it doesn't quite, that's the trick. But we don't recommend, we advise not to extend OffBiz or not to try to. First reason, it's not maintainable, and it's subject to change at any time, and that's not something we provide to you guys as a mechanism. So we'll see how we can solve that. In Confluence, pretty much the same story, different technologies. Bandana is an Atlassian developed framework, and same story, key value pair, except that Bandana will actually serialize for you. So just a bit of a bonus there, but not much. And the Confluence guys use Hibernate. And if we go to all the other products, Bamboo is the same as Confluence, and Fisheye, Crucible, and Crowd both provide you only with SAL. So just a quick word, I'm sure many of you know about SAL now. It stands for Shared Access Layer or Shared Application Layer, depending who you're talking to. And that's also available in all the products. It's just that the implementation is specific to each product. So SAL in Jira will be backed up by property set. So you choose to pick either one, and SAL interface for storing data, still key value pair, and it's you use plugin settings or plugin settings factory to access plugin settings, which then you can store in the back end of the product in a specific way. So basically, we end up with this. As a plugin developer, you get a key value pair. As an Atlassian developer, you're a bit luckier, and you get a nice ORM framework, and that's what you guys who wants to develop more, sophisticated plugins and stuff would like to be able to use. So how do we solve that? Well, active objects we think is a solution, but first let's see what we set, what sort of goals we did set for ourselves when starting this project. One thing is, first thing you want, if I tell you, okay, what do you want? You want to persist data? What sort of technology do you want to use? You want to use a database, right? You're not going to ask me for a key value pair map. Yeah, if you want to store a few settings and stuff like that, maybe that's fine. But if you have the choice, you're going to go with the database. So we want to provide you that. Then the second point is Atlassian products works on many databases. And we have to provide you guys with a solution that works on all those databases. It has to be, as much as we can, transparent for you guys. Just as the existing products actually are, or existing frameworks make it transparent. Some sort of ORM framework makes sense. You don't want to have to write raw SQL. If you're going to be database independent, ORM, that just makes sense. Then another goal we had is to sandbox it. One reason for that is we don't want you to, by mistake or whatever, change plugin data or plugin information right in the database. Because the plugin, the products data, products actually do a lot of caching, do a lot of indexing. If you change data in the database without going through their APIs, their services, that's not going to work. So we need your plugin data to be separate than the products data. We can't give you the access to the products data right out of the box. And another thing is you don't want another plugin to change your data. So we need to be careful about that. And of course, we need to make that backupable. Current frameworks, current solutions work on top of the existing ORM frameworks that in each product. So they take part in the backup of all the products. But this new solution that we'll put in place, if you have a new database, we need to be able to back that up at the same time as I do a backup for my conference instance or my Jira instance. So we need to provide that as part of the framework, and as much as possible, you shouldn't have to worry about that. Okay, so active objects. I bet you all wonder what it is. So active objects it's a Java.NET framework, library, open source project under the Apache license v2. So it's an ORM framework. The original author is Daniel Spiak. And we have at Atlassian 2 committers on the project, so we can change, fix bugs, update, do things. So it's not like we're not closed. We can affect the decision on the active objects source code itself. So what we want to provide to you as the database is, first and foremost, we want to provide you access to the products database. One major reason for that is, for you, that's easy. The database is already there. And for customers, it's easy. They don't have to set it up or do anything. It's already set up with the product. So as a plugin developer or as a plugin user, you just install the plugin. And then if it needs a database, then it's going to go and hit the product database and have its own sort of database within the database. Obviously, we'd like to be able to extend it so that you can target an external database as well. I know that's a question that also comes on the forums quite regularly. there are some use cases, like plugins that collect a lot of statistics and stuff like that, where an external database is required. You don't want to overload the products database with that information. And sometimes, we've had the case inside Atlassian where an embedded HSQL database, so something very simple, just in the home directory of a product, and you can start and have your plugin working. But what we really think is the way forward is using the products database. Active Objects provide us with support for all the databases, the major databases we support. Unfortunately for now, DB2 is not supported by Active Objects. But as I said, we have commit access, so we will implement that. And we will provide support for DB2. This is annoying. So just to show you how a little snippet of code here on how Active Objects works and what sort of ORM it is. Fairly easily, you can create an entity that's a table in the database and create your table row by just saving. So it's using the active record pattern. By basically, you have the save method on the entities themselves. Some like it, some don't. It works, and it's a lot easier than what you could have right now. Our solution for sandboxing is pretty much, as I say, in the products database as a plugin developer, you're going to have your own sort of database within the database. So the idea is that any table, any entity you create in Java is going to automatically create a table in the database. And what we do is we namespace those tables per plugin. The namespacing convention here is fairly simple. AO stands for Active Objects, obviously. And then we use the actual MD5 of the plugin key to prefix the rest of the entities. Obviously, it's something you will be able to configure, because if you want to change your plugin key, then how you find your database tables again. We thought about that, and that's something you should be able to configure through the Active Objects module. So this way, you get your database within your database. And we will implement backup restore. I've been working on Active Objects for some time. Backup restore is not quite there yet. It's not an easy issue to solve, but I'm actively working on it and thinking about it and to make it work, and we need to integrate it with the backup of the products. The idea being that once we're happy with the state of the plugin, it becomes a bundled plugin into the products, and backup is totally transparent to you. So backup will work just the same way as it works now. You click on the button, you get your backup as a zip file, as an XML file, depending on the products you're using. But you guys, as plugin developers, don't have to do a thing. It will be taken care of all for you. Just have to implement it. So a few other points why Active Objects is a good choice for us. It's a bit more from our perspective, but also for you. It's fairly lightweight, so that means that we don't add too much memory, too much stuff. We are constantly adding plugins, so we can't add a plugin that will add 100 megs of memory usage more on products. So that's a nice feature of Active Objects. You can't say that much about any ORM you find out there. It's OSGI friendly, so it works well within the plugin system. It's been pretty stable and working quite nicely. And we've been able to change what wasn't quite working, but there wasn't too much trouble. It's fairly easy to use. It's all annotation-driven entities. So you have your classes in Java. You can put annotations. Most of the time, you don't even have to. And it works. No external configuration, nothing. Apart from, obviously, you're going to have a bit of a configuration in your Atlassian plugin XML, which I'll show you later. But apart from that, it's just you write your Java code and off you go. And one big feature that ActiveObject has is schema migration. So the idea behind this feature is your entity model is going to change, right? From version 1 to version 2 of your plugin, you're going to add some entities, you're going to add some fields to some entities, you're going to remove some, and you will want to manage that. You need to update your database schema to actually reflect that. So the idea here is that ActiveObjects is capable of reading your entities, defining what the database schema should look like, and doing a diff with the database schema that already exists in the database. And then it can actually, with that diff, just add the extra columns, remove columns that should be removed. It will do all that work for you. So all what's left to you is pretty much being a bit careful, because you don't want to remove a column just like that. You probably want to migrate that data beforehand. So you don't want to do a too drastic change to your models from one version to another. And you want your customers to be aware of the changes and the path they have to take. But it means that you just have to worry about your data, not your database schema, not your upgrading your tables, not. It's all taken care of for you. So that's quite nice. And I'm going to show you a bit of code and how that actually works inside the products right now. Okay. Let's start here. So here, well, I got two projects open in my IDE. I got the ActiveObjects plugin, which I'm not going to show you too much about that. There's nothing interesting there, or not much from your perspective. But I have this to-do plugin. It's a very simple, basic plugin, very poor UI. You'll see that in a minute. But it should show you how you can use ActiveObjects, how you can leverage it in your plugin, and how easy it is to persist data. So the one first thing you have is your POM. That's basically pretty much a standard POM that you would create with the SDK. Nothing fancy here. The one thing you need to add is that dependency. So that's the ActiveObjects plugin itself. Use it as a dependency. Just make sure you scope it provided. Otherwise, you're going to bundle it in your plugin. But you do that, and you can start actually using ActiveObjects. Now, let me show you as well quickly here. Because it's a cross, this plugin is to-do plugin, just the same as the ActiveObjects plugin. It's a cross-product plugin. So I use profiles here to be able to use that in the Ref app, or in Confluence, or in Jira. But apart from that, this is nothing different. So the Ref app plugin here is part of the AMPS plugin suite that you all know about. And basically, because at the moment, the ActiveObjects plugin is not bundled into the, hold on, let me do that. Better. It's not bundled into the products. You actually have to add it as a plugin in your AMPS configuration. So you just do that, and that will let know AMPS to actually say, OK, I'm actually installing the to-do plugin, but I also need to install the ActiveObjects plugin on that application I'm going to be using. And we got this one, which is the SPI. You don't need to worry too much about it. It's just that in order to use the products database connection and other features of the products, they have to implement an SPI. But hopefully this will all be, this should all be gone once we're happy with the ActiveObjects plugin and we ship it as part of the platform and in all the products. So OK, now that you have all your dependencies and everything set up in your POM, you want to define your Atlassian plugin XML. Let me find the right one. That's the one. And there are two things you need to start with the ActiveObjects plugin. It's first, go away, the AO module. So that's a new module type introduced by the ActiveObjects plugin. And the configuration is as simple as can be, really. You just list the entities you're going to be using. So this plugin here has only one entity. I told you it was a very simple plugin, but I think it does the trick for showing how that all works. And the other thing you're going to need is that guy. It's importing the ActiveObjects service. So the ActiveObjects service is, I don't know if you remember on the slide about the ORM, I'll show you that you use the entity manager, which is the object around which everything revolves in ActiveObjects, the library. Well, ActiveObjects, the service, is the same for the plugin. It's basically a wrapper around the entity manager that you'll see a lot discussed in the ActiveObjects library documentation, etc. That's basically, we wrap it because we need to make it work, nicely with the OSGI environment, and there's some configuration to do here. So we wrap it in our own interface. But apart from that, you just use it the same way as you would use ActiveObjects, the entity manager in ActiveObjects. So once you have that, then you can start implementing your entity. To do, and an entity is an interface. It needs to extend entity, or there's also one class above that, that's a raw entity. Entity is nice because it actually defines an ID for you. This way you don't have to worry about the ID ever. It's in that interface, you just extend it, and you have it for free. And then all you define are your setters and getters, and those fields will be persisted for you in the database. So you see, I don't even have any annotation on the fields here. Everything will just work fine. You can put more annotations to define a bit more your database columns, etc., and details about persistence. But most of the time, you don't really have to. I just use the preload annotation here, just the convenience to say that I don't want all the fields to be lazily fetched. Once you fetch a database row, just fetch everything, and I'm happy with that. I'm not too worried about performance on that plugin here. And once you get your entity, all you need to do is implement a service. So here you can see that I inject, as part of my Atlassian plugin XML, I inject the ActiveObjects service into my own service implementation, and then creating a to-do is as simple as that. So using the ActiveObjects service to actually create the entity, setting the fields, and saving. And removing is quite simple as well. The one thing you need to do in all those plugins, or let me show you just before that it actually works, so that you'll be convinced. So I have here two things running. I have the ref app running, and I also have Confluence running. And I told you that the plugin was very basic and not very UI friendly. I'll show you why. So that's the ref app. I don't know if you guys know about the ref app. Who doesn't know what the ref app is and want? So just quickly, the ref app stands for reference application, and it's basically a web app that we have at Atlassian that you can use as well, but we mostly use it in cross-product plugin development. It's got all the cross-product plugins, and it serves as a base for us to develop. If it works on the ref app, well, let's put it the other way. If it doesn't work on the ref app, like my ActiveObjects plugin, then it won't work on any of the other products. If it works on the ref app, there's more chances it will work, but you still need to test it on the other products. So my to-do, here's my to-do. See, I'm not big on UI. So basically, all it does is I can add a task, and I can remove a task. Let's put another one. And all that goes into the database of the product itself. And I didn't have to write any SQL, worry about the database configuration. That's the whole setup that's already done as part of the product. And just to show you that it works the same in Confluence, it's not as much to show you that the To-Do plugin works in Confluence, but that the ActiveObjects plugin actually works and is a cross-product plugin that works in all the products that I'm saying it does. So pretty much the same URL, apart from obviously the start, and then I can add a task and remove it. So that's all backed up by the ActiveObjects plugin. And that uses that code. Two more things I want to add on the ActiveObjects plugin. First, you should always wrap all your database interactions within a transaction. And technically what you'd have to do is use the ActiveObjects service that we used before and do something like that. Whoops. Execute in transaction. Oh, come on. New transaction callback to do. A lot of fun to write. And that code would actually go in there. Did I do something? Yeah, I forgot to. A method would be nice. And that code would go there. So that's the sort of code that you'd have to write. Obviously, I didn't have to, so there's a better way of doing that. And the better way is in here. So you define your service as an interface, and on that interface, you can define that it needs a transaction. So for those of you who are familiar with Spring, it pretty much works the same way. You annotate a class, an interface, or its methods with the add transactional annotation, and then all the methods will be wrapped into a transaction. So the only thing you have to do for getting that is actually in your Atlassian plugin XML, add a transaction processor. So basically, you need to add a reference to that component, and that component will, when you install your plugin, detect the services interfaces that are annotated with the add transactional annotation, and then make sure that they're wrapped, or it wraps the methods in transaction appropriately. So that makes all the boilerplate code a lot easier to write. And you can go back to some nice method where you just care about creating your objects, removing your objects, and doing what you want to do, and not just write code for the sake of it. And obviously, you all test and like to test your plugins and make sure that everything works. Recently, I introduced in the ActiveObjects library a small testing framework to make it easier to actually make sure that my entities are persisted correctly inside the database. Because I want to make sure that this relationship works well, and that actually it works against all the different databases I say it works. Because even though we say that we're going to be supporting all the databases, you never know, there are bugs. It happens. So you want to do testing. So it's got, ActiveObjects got this integration with JUnit 4. I suppose everyone is familiar with JUnit 4 and the runners. So you can use the ActiveObject JUnit runner, and it does two things. Well, actually three. Yeah, let's say three. And the first thing it does is it automatically injects a properly configured entity manager inside your test. So that entity manager here is not set anywhere. You can see that IDEA is actually telling me that it's actually not set. It's because the JUnit runner will actually configure that and insert it for me. So I don't have to worry about that configuration. And the other nice thing that it does is it wraps all the test methods into a transaction that is rolled back after the test method has been run, which means that you can do anything you like to your database as it's rolled back. If the test fails or leaves, you can leave any data in the database. It will not be there for the other tests. So all your tests are really independent of each other, and they run quick. Coming back to the entity manager, I said properly configured. What does it mean? It means two things. One thing is defined by that annotation here, the @JDBC annotation, which actually gives the configuration. How do I connect to the database? Where is my database that I'm going to be using for testing? So if we go into that annotation quickly, it just requires a JDBC configuration interface. And this is basically, give me the URL, username, and password. And then I'll manage the connection myself. As you saw in the test, I'm using, my test is here, the HSQL one that comes from the ActiveObject that will be using an HSQL in-memory database. So it's fairly convenient. But you can implement that to be anything. In ActiveObjects itself, we use that framework, and it's configured so that it reads system property. If system properties are not there, we fall back on the HSQL database. But it means that I can configure my Maven so that I can test my ActiveObjects against any database by just setting system properties. That means I can have 10 Bamboo builds with all my different database configuration, and it works, it's fine. And I have the same tests running against my different databases. So that makes it fairly easy. And the other thing that it does do is this add data annotation. Basically, the idea here is, well, you probably need to prepare your database. Well, it's not probably. You'll need to prepare your database for testing, right? First thing you need to do is make sure that the tables are created. But then you might want to fill it with a bit of data and stuff to seed it with data that you can use for all your tests. So that's what you do in an implementation of the database updater here. And if we go in the to-do one, it doesn't do much. It just calls migrate on the entity manager. The entity manager you get here is the one that's injected into your test. What does that one does? It basically just creates a schema for that entity. So the database table will be created for me by just writing that line here. But I could have added a to-do or set 10 to-dos and then starting my test after that. And every time a test runs, the status is rolled back to whatever I did in the database updater. So that's basically testing with ActiveObjects. So it's fairly easy, and there's no reason not to do it. So that concludes the demo and a bit of a code that I show you for how to work with ActiveObjects. Now, we're pretty excited about that. As Jonathan said, it's now in version 0.9. It's not quite there yet to be a 1.0 or even a 1.0 beta. The main thing that we still have to work out is backup, because we feel really strongly about that. And that's not something you want to mess. You want to have that right. It's working in Confluence from 3.4 M2. So that's something that's available in your Maven repository. And so it will be working in the Confluence 3.4 that's coming out very soon. It's working in Jira 4.1.2, and it's been tested against all the databases that you see down there. So we're definitely working on testing it on all the other databases and extending the product support as well. And once we're happy with the database backup and maybe some other issues you guys will come up with, then we'll look into integrating that and bundling that into the products. What we really want is for you guys to have a go at it, test it, try it, find the bugs, if there are any. I'm sure there are. And come back to us. We want your feedback. This is something that's for you. So your feedback will drive what we're going to be doing next with that. And just before I go to the questions, here are a few references. The ActiveObjects plugin is available, visible on the Studio project. There's information on how to get started. There's the ActiveObjects library itself, obviously. And also the To-Do plugin, the symbol plugin I just showed you all the code, is available. It's open source. So have a go, play with it, and really, really let us know. We need your feedback on that. I think as well, there's going to be a roundtable tomorrow about ActiveObjects. So if you feel like it, just come talk to me. I'm happy to discuss anything around ActiveObjects, any issues, anything. If you guys have any question, I'm happy to try and answer them. Yes?
What shell types are supported? I'm especially interested in lists and blobs and libraries.
Well, I can't go into details, otherwise I would be saying mistakes here. But there are blobs. So from a Java perspective, supporting blobs, usually it's either byte array or streams, input streams. So they are supported in all the databases here. As far as I know, I want to make sure that that is correctly tested as well. Yes?
Is it possible to share databases across applications? Because you saw you did a to-do for Confluence, you did a to-do for reference app.
Mm-hmm.
But so I want to commentate, so I want
Well, I guess you could. Oh, sorry. The question is, can you share databases across application? So here I had a to-do list. Basically, that's work in the Ref app and in Confluence and in Jira. Could I use the one database for all that? Well, technically you could. Well, you could. We don't have external databases quite supported yet. But once we have that, there's no reason you couldn't point to the same database, right? The one place where you might have issues is caching. And we would need to provide maybe you a way to flush the cache from one product to another, or disable the caching altogether, which might not be a good idea as well. But that's where I could see that there would be an issue here. You might, yeah. Your best bet is probably, if I was trying to do something like that, I'd probably do it in one product and then use a REST interface from the other products to expose that maybe. Anyone else? Yes?
Does it support relations, like one-to-many, many-to-many?
Yes, is the answer. Is the short answer. The long answer is probably have a look into the ActiveObjects library documentation. But it does have support for relations. Yes? So you mean with, the question is, can I point to an existing database? You mean with existing tables? At the moment, no. That's something I've been, when discussing that with developers, that's something that people tend to do and want. So that's something we might consider. But at the moment, we enforce the naming of tables with regards to entity and with regard to the namespacing. One idea could be that if you start using an external database, then we don't enforce that, and we start letting you inject your own naming conventions maybe, but not at the moment. But that could be something to put on the roadmap. Anyone else? Nope. Thank you very much.